Good morning. Welcome to week 2 of our self-imposed quarantine as we are enduring this coronavirus thing. I hope that you guys are doing well, keeping yourselves occupied. Don't forget. I mean, it may seem boring, but remember we did have the choice book that you got in the beginning of the semester and wrote about in your readers' notebooks. I was looking through your writers/readers' notebooks and seeing some of the books. A lot of books sounded pretty interesting. So go back and finish it. You know, we might not have had too much time in class, but you certainly have enough time now. Also, I wanted to mention Audible has a special deal for students who are out of school right now, where tons of books are free for you. So you can be, you know, doing dishes, doing your chores, whatnot, whatever your parents are having you take care of, and you can be reading through your ears, listening. So I love Audible. I pay for it, but they have all these free books available right now, which is fantastic. So if you want to take them up on that offer, tremendous. Today we're starting Romeo and Juliet, Act 4. Looking back at Act 3 was huge, right? Mercutio died, Tybalt died, Romeo banished. Today in your writer's notebook, you'll talk about what it means to be banished in modern equivalents. So that should be interesting. I had a separate video today, which was just a little bit of fluff, me talking to you guys outside of the video, but I read several of your prequel stories for what happened with Montagues and the Capulets, what caused the feud. So it's a short video. You also get to see Kitty in that video. So no animals in this one. All right, so we are beginning Act 4, Scene 1 today. We're in Friar Lawrence's cell. Remember, the last thing that happened at the end of Act 3 was that Juliet said, I'm going to go talk to the friar. Nurse had betrayed her. Parents said, you're getting married on Thursday no matter what. And the nurse is like, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Her only confidant, her sole confidant. And I can't emphasize enough that that betrayal by the nurse sends Juliet on a downward spiral through the story. So we pick up with Juliet in Act 4, Scene 1. By the way, Act 4, no Romeo, the whole thing. Just to tell you ahead of time, Romeo is in Mantua. Act 4 takes place in Verona, so we don't get to see Romeo at all in Act 4, which is interesting. It's all from Juliet's perspective. So we pick up with Juliet, Act 4, Scene 1, in Friar Lawrence's cell. Okay, gonna make myself small here. All right. So we have in Friar Lawrence's cell. There we go. Okay. In Friar Lawrence's cell, Paris is there. Oh, that's great. Remember, the big fight in Capulet household was because Paris and Juliet, according to Lord Capulet, are going to be married on Thursday next, this upcoming Thursday. Friar Lawrence reacts as you would think he might react. On Thursday, sir, the time is very short. My father Capulet will have it so, and I am nothing slow to slack his haste. Slack his haste means to slow him down. He's like, hey, my father-in-law wants it done quickly. I'm not going to slow him down. Friar Lawrence says, you say you do not know the lady's mind. Uneven is the course. I like it not. So Friar Lawrence is doing his best to kind of passive-aggressively slow this down, stop this from happening, because he knows what's really going on, obviously. He says, you don't know the lady's mind. You don't know what Juliet wants. This could be a rocky road ahead. I don't like it. Paris says, immoderately she weeps for Tybalt's death, and therefore have I little talked of love, for Venus smiles not in a house of tears. Again, that allusion to Venus, the goddess of love. She does not smile in a house of tears, which, according to him, Juliet is weeping immoderately, like unendingly, about Tybalt's death. Continuing, he says, now, sir, her father counts it dangerous that she do give her sorrow so much sway, and in his wisdom hastes our merits to stop the inundation of her tears, which, too much minded by herself alone, may be put from her by society. Now do you know the reason of this haste? All right, this inundation of tears, according to Paris, is inundation is a flood. A flood of tears from Juliet is the reason for the haste to get married this Thursday. Friar Lawrence says in an aside, so only the audience hears him, I knew not why it should be slowed. And basically means, I wish I didn't know the reason why this can't happen. He says, look, sir, here comes the lady toward my cell. Juliet enters. Paris says, happily met, my lady and my wife. Juliet, that may be, sir, when I may be a wife. Okay. Some verbal irony, some dramatic irony. Obviously, we, the audience, knows what's really going on with Juliet. And he says, my lady and my wife. She says, that may be, but I may be a wife. So he may think she's talking about him, but we know she's certainly talking about Romeo. Okay. So again, she says, that may be, sir, when I may be a wife. And Paris says, that maybe must be, love, on Thursday next. Juliet says, what must be shall be. Friar Lawrence, that's a certain text. Paris says, come you to make confession to this father? She says, to answer that, I should confess to you. Paris, do not deny to him that you love me. Juliet, I will confess to you that I love him. Paris, so will ye, I am sure that you love me. Juliet, if I do so, it will be of more price being spoke behind your back than to your face. All right, so Juliet, he says, don't deny that you love me when you're confessing to the friar. And she says, I will confess to you that I love him. Paris probably thinks that him is the Lord, God. But in reality, obviously, we know it's Romeo. Paris says, and of course, you're also going to confess that you love me. And she says, well, it'll mean more if I say it behind your back, because I'm not going to say it to your face. So this could be played with some humor, I think, by the actors, Juliet and Paris playing the actors. But as we see, there's a switch here, and Paris gets a little bit more sinister, a little bit more in the kind of ownership aspect of marriage, which is quite sinister when we know that she's married to someone else. Paris says, poor soul, thy face is much abused with tears. Juliet, the tears have got small victory by that, for it was bad enough before their spites. Paris, thou wrongest more than tears with that report. All right, so she says, my face was ugly before the tears, and he's like, oh, you do your face wrong. Juliet says, that is no slander, sir, which is a truth, and what I spake it to my face. He says, thy face is mine, and thou hast slandered it. All right, so you get the ownership of a future husband saying, thy face is mine, which could certainly be played with some sinister elements by the actor playing Paris here. He says, you've slandered your face, but that face is mine, so don't slander things that are mine. Juliet says, it may be so, for it is not mine own. Again, verbal irony there. She says, it may be so, because my face doesn't belong to me. In reality, she is of ownership of her husband. That actually belongs to Romeo. So verbal irony, situational irony here, just dripping with irony, all kinds. She says, are you at leisure, Holy Father, now, or shall I come to you at evening mass? So she's like, can we please get to the point and get Paris out of here? And Friar Lawrence is going to agree and usher Paris away. He says, my leisure serves me, pensive daughter, now. My lord, we must entreat the time alone. So he says that to Paris. We gotta talk alone. Paris says, God shield, I should disturb devotion. You can just smell the smugness coming off of him. He says, Juliet, on Thursday early will I rouse ye. And he kisses her. Think about the way this kiss would fall on her, also on the audience, with him kissing her, when we know that it's Romeo and he kisses her. How it's done is really up to the actors. But she could be really stiff. She could pull away, like, oh, I'm going to hold off on this. However they do it, it obviously wouldn't have the passion that it does between Romeo and Juliet when they kiss. Paris kisses her. He says, till then, adieu, and keep this holy kiss. And Paris exits. When he does, Juliet says, oh, shut the door, and when thou hast done so, come weep with me, past hope, past cure, past help. She wants the Friar Lawrence to commiserate with her, to join in her misery as she's having to deal with this. And Friar Lawrence says, oh, Juliet, I already know thy grief. It strains me past the compass of my wits. I hear thou must, and nothing may prorogue it, on Thursday next be married to this county. Juliet says, tell me not, friar, that thou hearest of this. So he says, I already heard about it. I already heard that you're getting married to Paris this Thursday next, and nothing may prorogue it. Nothing may delay it at all. And Juliet says, tell me not, friar, that thou hearest of this, unless thou tell me how I may prevent it. If in thy wisdom thou canst give no help, do thou but call my resolution wise, and with this knife I'll help it presently. And she shows him a knife. She pulls out a knife. letting him know, just like Romeo, she is willing to end this. She is willing to take care of this herself. So Juliet is already showing suicidal tendencies here. She says, with this knife, I'll help it presently. She says, God joined my heart and Romeo's, thou our hands, thou, Friar Lawrence, you joined our hands together. She says, and ere this hand by thee to Romeo sealed shall be the label to another deed, or my true heart with treacherous revolt turn to another, this shall slay them both. So she says, before this hand by you, Friar Lawrence, to Romeo sealed in marriage, shall be the label to another deed, shall be assigned to a different deed, a different wedding certificate, essentially. She says, my true heart with treacherous revolt will turn to another, that I'm going to be, before I'm ever going to be treacherous to another and cheat on Romeo, this will slay them both, my heart and myself. She says, therefore, out of thy long experience time, give me some present counsel, or behold, twixt my extremes and me, this bloody knife shall play the umpire, arbitrating that which the commission of thy years and art could to no issue of true honor bring. So here she says, give me some counsel, or behold, probably holding the knife up again. She says, twixt my extremes and me, this bloody knife. My extremes here, she means my extreme situation, the dangerous situation in which I find myself, and me. So between my situation and me, this knife will play the umpire. It will decide. It will decide what to do, right? Arbitrating means judging. Arbitrating that which the commission of thy years, the authority of your years, and art, the art of his ministry, could to no issue of true honor bring. The issue means outcome here. So it could to no outcome of true honor bring. It won't bring honor to either one of us, your advice. And so if you can't, then this knife can. She says, be not so long to speak, I long to die. If what thou speakest, speak not of remedy. She tells him she longs to die. If you long for something, you're yearning for it. So she's showing bravery, but she's also showing that she's not balanced right here. She is willing and ready to commit suicide if Friar Lawrence cannot fix what she's going through. So Friar Lawrence here sees her desperation, is concerned for her. He says, hold, daughter, stop threatening yourself with the knife. He says, I do spy a kind of hope which craves as desperate an execution as that is desperate which we would prevent. So he says he thinks he has some kind of a plan, that it's desperate in execution, but if you're desperate enough to try to kill yourself, that's what we're trying to prevent. So we're going to try this plan out. So here is Friar Lawrence's plan. Pay close attention to what he says. He says, if, rather than to marry County Paris, thou hast the strength of will to slay thyself, then is it likely thou wilt undertake a thing like death, to chide away this shame, that copest with death himself to escape from it. And if thou darest, I'll give thee remedy. So he says, if you're desperate enough to kill yourself instead of marrying County Paris, he's like, I've got something that can put you in a state like death. Undertake a thing like death to chide away the shame, to find a way around this disgrace. Okay? He says that copest with death himself, that copest with means to meet and struggle with. So he says you will meet and struggle with death himself, but escape from it if you dare. He says, so I will give you the remedy if you're willing. And she says, oh, bid me leap rather than marry Paris from off the battlements of yonder tower. All right, so she's going to give a series of things that she would do rather than marry Paris. The first one is to leap off the battlements of the tower. The battlements are like the tall, like towers, the tallest part of the tower. So she's saying she'll leap off the tallest tower. She says, or walk in thievish ways, or bid me lurk where serpents are, chain me with roaring bears, or shut me nightly in a charnel house, or recovered quite with dead men's rattling bones. A charnel house is a storage place for bones and skulls that are dug up from old graves. So it's not even as nice as a sepulcher, which would be like a building in which they house honored ancestors' bones. No, this is the charnel house. So when they only have so much space in Britain, or actually we're in Italy, only so much space. And so when they dig graves, they might find old graves, old bones. And so those go into a charnel house. She says, shut me up in there, covered up with dead men's rattling bones. I'd rather do that than marry Paris. She says, bid me lurk where serpents are. So I'll dare snakes. She says, chain me with roaring bears. I can walk among thieves. She goes on about the bones here with reeky shanks and yellow chapless skulls. She's describing the things that she would lay with in this charnel house rather than marry Paris. She says, or bid me go into a new-made grave and hide me with a dead man in his shroud. Things that to hear them told have made me tremble. And I will do it without fear or doubt, to live an unstained wife to my sweet love. So think about all these things that she's willing to do. Chained with bears, lurk with serpents, be cooped up in a charnel house with a bunch of bones, or lay me in a fresh grave with a dead man decomposing on top of me. She says, all of these things make me tremble, but I would rather do that than to be an unstained wife to my sweet love and marry Paris. Okay? So she wants to remain an unstained wife for Romeo. And Friar Lawrence repeats, he says, hold then. So hold off what you're doing. Okay? And now there's steps to the plan. First step, go home. Be merry. Give consent to marry Paris. Tell them that you're going to marry Paris. Wednesday is tomorrow. Tomorrow night, look that thou lie alone. Let not the nurse lie with thee in thy chamber. And then he shows her a vial. He pulls up a vial. That's what I check my fish tank with. Right, there it is, the vial. So he holds up a vial. He says, take thou this vial, being then in bed, and this distilled liquor drink thou off, when presently through all thy veins shall run a cold and drowsy humor, for no pulse shall keep his native progress, but surcease. All right, so he offers this vial to Juliet, and he says, once you're in bed, the nurse is not in there with you, and he says, drink the whole thing. It'll run through your veins, a cold and drowsy humor. A humor is like a liquor. A fluid, a feeling. So he says, a cold and drowsy humor will run through your veins, and no pulse shall keep his native progress, but surcease. So it will stop her heartbeat, it will stop her pulse, and put her into such a deep sleep. Okay, she's not dead, but he says that it will stop its native progress, surcease it, which means your pulse will stop. He says, no warmth, no breath shall testify thou livest. The roses in thy lips and cheeks shall fade to paly ashes. Thy eyes' windows fall like death when he shuts up the day of life. Each part, deprived of supple government, shall, stiff and stark and cold, appear like death. And in this borrowed likeness of shrunk death thou shalt continue 42 hours, and then awake as from a pleasant sleep. Okay? So the plan is that the potion that he's giving her right now, this guy, potion will put her into such a deep sleep, it will stop her pulse, it will even make her seem stiff like death. Okay, I'm not sure that there's any potions that will actually do that, but hey, suspension of disbelief here. He says there will be no warmth, no breath, you'll stiffen, it'll seem like you're dead. He says, and in this borrowed likeness of shrunk death, you'll continue for 42 hours. So 42 hours, she'll be in the state of near death. That is like death. And he says, and then you'll awake as from a pleasant sleep. This is the plan. He says, now when the bridegroom in the morning comes to rouse thee from thy bed, there art thou dead. So basically, when Paris comes on Thursday morning to rouse you from your bed, there you are, seeming to be dead. He says, then, as the manner of our country is, in thy best robes, uncovered on the bier, thou shalt be borne to that same ancient vault where all the kindred of the Capulets lie. Okay, so they will take her body, cover her, take her on a funeral bier to the sepulchre, which is a house of the dead, in which all the kindred of the Capulets lie, this ancient vault. He says, in the meantime, against thou shalt awake, shall Romeo by my letters know our drift, and hither shall he come, and he and I will watch thy waking, and that very night shall Romeo bear thee hence to Mantua. And this shall free thee from this present shame, if no inconstant toy nor womanish fear abate thy valor in the acting of it. Okay? So he'll send a letter to Romeo to let him know. Romeo will come here to Friar Lawrence's cell, and then he and Friar Lawrence will watch her wake in the sepulchre on that very night, and then Romeo will take her away to Mantua. Everyone will think she's dead. It'll free her from the shame of having to marry a second man. And he says if there's no inconstant toy, meaning a whim or a trifle, if you have some kind of an inclination against it, or your womanish fear, not the most progressive, Shakespeare, womanish fear, he says, abate thy valor in the acting it. He says, reduce your valor in the acting of this. Okay? Juliet shows great bravery without a second thought. She says, give me, oh, tell me not of fear. Okay? Friar Lawrence gives her the vial, says, hold, get you gone. Be strong and prosperous in this resolve. I'll send a friar with speed to Mantua with my letters to thy lord. Juliet says, love give me strength, and strength shall help afford. Farewell, dear father. Okay? And they exit separately. Okay, so at the end of Act 4, Scene 1, we have the plan. Friar Lawrence has given the plan here, that they are going to, first thing she's got to do is go home. He says, be merry, be happy. The third thing she needs to do is give consent to be married. Fourth, make sure nurse isn't in your room. Number 5, once you're alone in your room tonight, she's going to drink this vial. It's going to put her into a state of near death. Everyone's going to think she's dead, and it'll put her in that for 42 hours. In the meantime, Friar Lawrence is going to send a letter to Romeo, using another friar named John, who is going to hopefully get Romeo that letter, and then he and Friar Lawrence will come and be there when she awakens, and then Romeo will take her off to Mantua. Everyone will think she's dead. They're faking her death. Okay? This is the plan. All right. Act 4, Scene 2 is really short, so we're going to include that with this video. We're going to continue on today. Okay. Here we are back in the Capulet household, Capulet's mansion. Enter Father Capulet, Mother, Lady Capulet, nurse, and several servingmen. Capulet, he gives paper to a first servingman, says, so many guests invite as here writ. This echoes the earlier scene where he gives the letter to the guy who can't read, the servant who can't read. He says to the second one, sir, go hire me 20 cunning cooks. He servants, you shall have none ill, sir, for I'll try if they can lick their fingers. Meaning, if a cook can lick their fingers, they're not giving you poison. they make good food. Capulet, how canst thou try them so? He says, marry, sir, 'tis an ill cook that cannot lick his own fingers. Therefore, he that cannot lick his fingers goes not with me. Capulet, go, be gone. We shall be much unfurnished for this time. So Capulet says, I got things to take care of. The wedding's in 2 days, and I'm not quite ready. Exit the second servingman. He says, what? Is my daughter gone to Friar Lawrence? The nurse says, aye, forsooth. Forsooth means in truth or indeed. So she says, yes, indeed, that's where she went to confession. Capulet says, well, he may choose to do some good on her. A peevish, self-willed harlotry it is. So he's still speaking very poorly of his own daughter. Using that word harlotry indicates that he is still angry about how self-willed and peevish she is here. Peevish means means bothered by minor things. So he calls her this peevish, self-willed harlotry. Then Juliet enters, and the nurse says, see where she comes from shift with merry look. Capulet, how now, my headstrong? Where have you been gadding? This word gadding means wandering. He calls her headstrong. My headstrong, where have you been gadding, wandering about? Juliet says, where I have learned me to repent the sin of disobedient opposition to you and your behests, and am enjoined by holy Lawrence to fall prostrate here to beg your pardon. And she falls down to her knees and says, pardon, I beseech you. Henceforward I am ever ruled by you. Juliet says to Capulet. Obviously some dramatic irony here. Capulet, send for the county. Go tell him of this. I'll have this knot knit up tomorrow morning. She says, I met the youthful lord at Lawrence's cell, and gave him what becomed love I might, not stepping o'er the bounds of modesty. So Capulet's like, let Count Paris know. Tell him that we'll have the knot knit up tomorrow morning, meaning tying the knot, tying the marriage knot tomorrow morning. And Juliet says, I already spoke him and gave him all the love that I'm going to. Verbal irony there. She says, but I did not step over the bounds of modesty. Capulet says, why, I am glad on it. This is well. Stand up. And he motions for Juliet to stand up. He says, "This is as it should be. Let me see the county. Aye, Mary, go, I say, and fetch him hither." Telling a servant, who probably runs off the stage, says, "Now before God, this reverend holy friar, our whole city is much bound to him." He's praising the friar for changing Juliet's mind here and saying our whole city is bound to him. And Juliet says, "Nurse, will you go with me into my closet to help me sort such needful ornaments as you think fit to furnish me tomorrow?" A closet is her bedroom. So when she says, "Go with me into my closet," that's into my bedroom to help me get my clothes ready for tomorrow, supposedly for the wedding. Okay, so she beckons the nurse to go with her. Lady Capulet says, "No, not till Thursday. There is time enough." Capulet says, "Go, nurse, go with her. We'll to church tomorrow." All right, so Capulet is so excited that she has changed her mind, that he's moved it from Thursday up to Wednesday. So Lady Capulet's like, no, let's wait till Thursday. She probably has some things she wants to get done before the wedding. There's time. Capulet's like, no, go, nurse. She said she's going to get married, so we're going to do it now before she changes her mind. So we'll go to church tomorrow. Okay, moves up the timeline a little bit, but Juliet has the potion, so she's going to improvise. Exit Juliet and the nurse, leaving behind Lord and Lady Capulet. Lady Capulet says, "We shall be short in our provision. 'Tis now near night." Our provisions for the wedding. We're not going to have enough food for the wedding. It's now near night. How am I supposed to be ready for the wedding in the morning? He says, "Tush! I will stir about, and all things shall be well. I warn thee, wife, go thou to Juliet. Help to deck up her. I'll not to bed tonight. Let me alone. I'll play the housewife for this once." So he says, "Don't you worry about taking care of your wifely duties and getting this wedding ready." He says, "I'll stay up all night. I'll take care of this. I'm the one that wants the wedding tomorrow." He says, "Go, take care of Juliet. I'll play the housewife for this once." Lady Capulet exits, and Lord Capulet has a mini soliloquy where he says, "What ho! They are all forth. Well, I will walk myself to County Paris to prepare him up against tomorrow. My heart is wondrous light, since the same wayward girl is so reclaimed." All right, so Lord Capulet ends the scene ebullient. He's so happy Juliet has changed her mind. She is not disobeying him, committing this horrible transgression of disobedience. And he says, "My heart is wondrous light because this wayward girl has been reclaimed. She's come back to her senses." All right. So the plot is thickening. Things are going even quicker. Again, the tragic flaw of Romeo and Juliet rushing into things is now being echoed by people around her. We see Lord Capulet wants to rush into the wedding. Lady Capulet wants to stop. Lord Capulet's like, no, we got to do it now. And so they are going to. All right. Our next scene, we'll see Nurse and Juliet in their in her bedroom. Lady Capulet will come and say hi, but we'll save that for tomorrow. All right. You guys work on your study guide for Act 4, Scenes 1 and 2. And enjoy the rest of your day. Be sure to budget your time. Maybe get a good book in today. All right. Have a great one. See you whenever I can stop this video from going. Wait, what's happened?